Okay, well, welcome everyone. This session today is mainly about fixed fields and the 007 and using the wizard to alter or create the 007. And for the first part of this, I picked a record completely at random out of James Patterson's many books and thought we could just look at the fixed field box. The fixed field box is a more graphical, easy way to alter fields that are contained in the 008 and the leader. And some of the fields also impact the 006, but the 006 is used for additional material, so we don't have that particular tag in this record. So if we start looking at this fixed field box, the first one is type. And there's been improvement in the software, so a lot of these boxes now have the ability to right-click on them and get a list of the allowable values. So you can see that type A matches books and documents. Most of the time, this field should be right when you import a record, so usually not much need to alter this. Okay, this next one is the encoding level. And here again, for the most part, you don't have to edit this. You can keep whatever is in this field, with the exception of a pre-publication record, which is a bibliographic record that was created before the item was published. And in that case, it's going to have a value of 8, and you would need to change that. So this is one of those that does not have the values listed. But if we go out to the web, OCLC has a fixed fields page, and you can click on that and get more information about it. And so it describes each of the different levels. We see that a blank is full level, 1 is full level but material not examined, and so on. So if we get down here, we can see that a K is a minimal level input by OCLC participants. So just an explanation of why it has a K in there. So whoever coded this felt that that was the proper encoding level. Source, here again, that one doesn't have values. It's not something that you're going to typically edit, but I wanted to show you what it is. Source. Okay, so a blank would be a national bibliographic agency. So this would be like Library of Congress, or a cooperative cataloging program, or D other. So that's the... And if there are any questions as I go along, feel free to interject, and mentors, if I have missed something, feel free to chime in as well. The next one is audience level, and this is one of those that does have values defined for it. If you right-click, you can see. So whoever cataloged this put it as G for general. Now the control, or C type of control, that again doesn't have values. So let's come over here and see what that one is. Just means no specific type of control. This is hardly ever, I don't think I've ever changed this for any reason. Language. That's pretty self-explanatory. ENG for English. If you right-click on this, it does give you the short codes for various languages. Probably Spanish is our most common one that we're using in this field as an alternative. Okay, the bibliographic level. Here again, we right-click on it and we can see that this is a monograph. It's an item. Form, there's nothing specified for this particular record, but if we right-click on it, we can see that there are some forms to choose from. Most often with books, we're putting a D in here for large print. Okay, next one, CONF stands for whether it's a conference publication. If it's not a conference publication, a 0 goes in here. Next one, BIOG, indicates whether it's a biography. And it's not in this case. If we right-click on it, there's nothing there. Let's go out to the OCLC website and see what it says for this field. If it's a blank, that means there's no biographical material. If it's an autobiography, an A would go in here, and if it's individual biography, a B, and so on. Now the MREC, modified record code. There again, haven't used it, so let's look over and see what OCLC has to say about it. Whether bibliographic information was modified for entry into machine-readable format. Don't think it's going to apply to any of our records. Country. For the country, for things that are published in the US, the code always ends in U, and the first 2 characters are the state abbreviation. If you can't remember what the state code is, here's a handy list. Of course, it's very long, all the countries along with states. If we get down to New York, you can see that, well, I have to keep going. New York State, NYU. CONT, the nature of contents. Let's right-click and see. Oftentimes this is left blank, but it can be filled in. The blank means that it's not specified. But if you wanted to specifically say that this was a comic or graphic novel, you could put a 6 in here. It's just a way of narrowing down the content if your material has a particular bent. Useful when it's a dictionary, encyclopedia, those kinds of things. For regular fiction, not needed. This
probably the most common you'll see in that is a B for bibliography.
Yes. Yeah. And that just means that it has a bibliography somewhere in the content, right? Yeah.
Yep.
The GPub has to do with whether this is a government publication.
Yep.
So most of the stuff that we're dealing with, we're not going to have to worry about that. But if we wanted to hop out to look at GPub on this Fixed Fields website, it will give you the various codes that go with it. Obviously, blank means not a government publication. And then there's different multi-local, federal, national. So universities and community colleges might be more apt to have this kind of cataloging need, but not so much the public libraries. Okay, this Lit F, when I told you I chose this record by random, I really did. So when we right-click on this Lit F, this has to do with whether it's fiction or nonfiction. So in this case, it's been cataloged, and rather than just choosing the one fiction, which is what I see most of the time, they've chosen F for novels. So it's just a more specific derivative of the fiction. One of the cautions I make, if you're too specific and the patrons use a search which narrows down to fiction, it won't find it. Let me bring up the search. Right now we have this literary form search filter, and so we've got fiction not further specified. So there's pros and cons, I guess, to making this more specific. I might lean towards making this a 1.
Well, and the more specific actually has been just in the last, I don't know, maybe 8-10 years or so, but that's been broken out more too. So if you're not as familiar with it, don't panic, because
you can just leave it the way it is.
And that may be stretching the time frame on it too. But
so this is not a problem having this value in here. It was just a little different than I was used to seeing. So I wanted to show you what that F meant. This next one, index, just has to do whether the particular book has an index or not. If it does not have an index, it says 0. If it does, it's a 1. And there again, it doesn't list those values, but we can look them up on the website. So descriptive cataloging form, sorry. That one is not right-clickable for the values. So let's look over here. Okay. So this has to do with the level, the form of descriptive cataloging. So whether it's been cataloged to a certain standard. And our value, let me look back over here. We had an I in there. And it's saying ISBD. Descriptive portion of the record contains punctuation provisions of the ISBD. Probably more detail than you were interested in, but like I said, this is one of those that will come in with your imported records and not something that you're going to need to alter, but I just wanted to let you know what it was. This ILS...
Can I, before you go on, can I just interject there, Beth?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
If you look down in the 0440 field and you see that's field E, RDA, those two are companion pieces. So RDA records, that's the way they're going to come in looking. Whereas you probably, if you've been cataloging for a while under the ADR2, the Anglo-American Cataloging Rules, second edition, it would be an A.
Yeah.
So when they shifted to RDA, this is the decision that they made, was to use the ISBD, which is a predecessor of, and it had more to do with the punctuation, as that chart said, and notated in the 040 subfield.
thanks for adding that, Dia.
Mm-hmm.
So with RDA records, you'll see mostly I. With our older records, mostly A. This next field has to do with illustrations or maps, those kinds of things. It allows up to 4 values to be specified. And if you right-click on this, it will show you the different ones that can be specified. Most common illustrations, A. Some materials will contain maps. If you have both illustrations and maps, you would put both A and B. And plates is another one that we see. And I guess photographs. So like I said, you can specify up to 4 values in this particular block.
Beth?
Yes.
This is Catherine.
Hi.
In that field right there, if you had 2 or 3, do you just put ADF? Do you put commas between, or how would that look?
You just type in the values, like AB, and leave it at that. Yeah.
Okay.
No spaces, no commas, or punctuation, just the values.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Festschrift is a very unusual category, and it's hardly ever used, and I often have to look it up just because I forget what the technical definition is. It's a memorial publication, usually in the form of essays. Let's see. Most of the time it's not a Festschrift. Results of research issued in honor of a person, institution, or a society. As a rule, on the occasion of an anniversary celebration. So I don't know how many Festschrifts we have in our catalog, but I would suspect not very many. The next block has to do with date and the type of date. So if we right-click on this, you can see all of the different possibilities. Most often used are S for a single known date, and R for reprint, so you would have the reissue date and the original date. And I've seen a T as well, publication date and copyright date. So I say those are the most common, but of course there are some other possibilities as well. So once you specify that, then with this one being a single date, there's only one date given in date 1. If we had used an R or a T, you would have 2 dates. Date 1 is the most recent, date 2 the older date, which is most often the copyright date. Okay, so that covers all of the fields in the box. Any questions before we move on? Okay, very quiet. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to search results. So it's thinking I made some changes. I don't remember making any changes, just looking at stuff, but I'm going to click OK anyway. And I'm going to go back to search results. When I did the search under James Patterson, some sound recordings came up without an icon. And usually a good clue if an icon is not displaying, it's usually because the 007 is either missing or it's incorrect for some reason. So I thought, well, this would be a good exercise for us to look at the 007. So I'm going to click on one of these and go into edit. And we see that it does have an 007, but it's not displaying our CD image like it should. So we now, most of you probably know that we have an 007 wizard available to us now called a physical characteristics wizard. If you right click on the data portion of the 007, you can choose this, and what it does is it walks you through choosing the various options of the 007. So the first one is sound recording, and that's correct. We click on next, and sound disk, that's also correct. Next, speed, that's correct. Okay, configuration of playback channels. I don't know that this one is. Groove width or pitch, not applicable. Next. The size looks right. Tape width is not applicable. Tape configuration not applicable. Special playback. Okay, so the 007 actually looks fine. So it wasn't a problem with the 007, but look at our type. If we click on this, it's a type that doesn't even exist. And one of the things that drives these icons is both the type, whatever is in this field, and the 007. So because the type was wrong, it wasn't able to display the icon correctly. So I changed it to an I for audiobook. Click on Save Record. Now if we go up to OPAC View, we now see our book on CD. Any questions about the 007?
I don't have a question, but I thought I'd make a note. Sometimes if you make a correction like that in the type, you'll notice that the fixed field box changes a bit. And sometimes if you're changing between those formats, you'll notice there's a lag between getting maybe the 3 levels to 4 levels, or vice versa. So this particular one is missing that 4th level for the sound recordings, and it's sometimes you have to kind of go in and out of the record itself, bring up a different record so that it will load it properly with that full. If you're wondering what happened to it.
Yeah. So let's. I'll go out of this one, go back to search results. We can fix another one and then go back to this one. Because I noticed there was yet another one. So I'm wondering if the whole batch came in with the wrong type here. Yep. So let's go ahead and change that to I. Click on Save. We still only have the 3. All right, go back to search results. So our icons are displaying now, but we probably have some fixed fields that need to be corrected since the type was wrong in the first place.
Beth, this is Ellen. When you say you still only have the 3, what are you referring to?
Oh, I'm sorry, the 3 lines. I brought this record up again since I went into another record and came back, like Dia said, it's adjusted the display. It's not cached anymore. And now we have some other things that we can fill in that are specific to sound recordings.
Okay.
So, go ahead.
It lost the last line of the table. I don't know if you noticed when she did the second one, when she changed it from a Q to an I, the Q, there was 4 lines in that table, top to bottom, and then it jumped to 3. And it's with the whole fixed fields is readjusting to fit that type.
And it takes
it's
a
going
little
to
bit.
kind of right. It's kind of going to, it's taking the ones that are the common between all of them and showing those. So, if that helps.
So
yeah, that helps.
the country here, it says XXU. And if we go down to the 260, we see that the only thing written in here is United States. So that's why it says XXU. There was no specific location given other than just the United States. So let's look at the new things that are in this fixed field box because it's a sound recording. So this one has to do with the type of arrangement. So if there's not an arrangement or transposition, then this just stays blank. So this has to do with a different form of audio. The part there again has to do with more musical, instrumental. The L text, if it's blank, it means the item is a music sound recording, which is not necessarily the case. So in this case, I could keep those options up there longer, but in looking down through them, this is a piece, it's a fiction audiobook. So my guess, we would put fiction in this category. So F muse means, okay, N not applicable because this is, again, not music. The ACCM has to do with accompanying matter. And in this case, it's blank because we don't have any accompanying matter. The comp is the form of composition. There again, let's got to right click on the right field here. So this again has to do with music and the type of composition, so it doesn't apply to our audiobook. But it does give you an idea of some of the fixed fields that will most likely be filled in already for you when you bring in a musical recording. So since we changed those, I'll click on Save for the record. I'll go back to search results and fix this one since we're in there as well. Okay. We left these blank. We put an F in there for literary text. Save. And this one also has just the United States. Okay, any other questions before we close off for today?
Have we answered the chat comment?
Are you talking about Heather's chat?
Yeah, I just wondered if we'd skipped ahead of her or something.
No, I think we answered in it. With changing the type, you do need to go back and change to make sure your fixed fields are now set correctly. Just curious. Okay, so this audience level is set to adult.
And I might note that the mentors have talked a lot about the audience field and the use of that adult version. And we kind of feel like it eliminates a lot of possibility of folks if they filter. And generally the feeling of the mentors is more or less, and from what we've been able to research, that tends to be more towards literally adult materials. So in our system, if you could kind of watch that, if it's not strictly an adult material, then think about removing it or not using it, please.
So should we have them look at this when they're importing records and change it, or just leave it?
It's probably okay to leave, but just as a caution, I thought I'd mention that since it came up.
Yeah, and we did notice that we're seeing this more and more in records. So it may be a trend with imports, but a very good discussion, because like Dia said,
just to be aware of.
Yeah, it does limit, because as if I show this search filter screen again, we do have an audience filter box. If they're not filtering, they're going to get everything. But if they choose a specific one, then they're only going to get books that have been cataloged with that type, if that makes sense. Although you can do a control click and specify more than one. So if I wanted to do adult and general, it would bring up both of those.
I wonder how many staff people are aware of that capability, let alone patrons.
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing.
Just out of curiosity, how many of the folks that are attending were aware of that?
Okay. So more not than did, so it might be something we want to send out in a post of some kind.
And or include in some of the help screens, especially for patrons.
Yeah, that's true. So if I did a search, go ahead. Let's see. Okay, and I also specify book up here. You notice that I didn't specify anything in keyword or anything in title or author. Obviously, this is a lot of results and more germane to maybe DVDs, but this is a way to get a list of everything in a certain category. Since I chose adult in general, it's, we're going to get a lot of mix, but it's just another technique. And I can unclick those, possibly.
And of course, those are based on whether or not the materials are coded all properly.
Correct.
So, for instance, those 2 sound recordings that we just saw, if you were looking for sound recording, those would not have showed up with the Q as a type. That's what I mean.
That they would not. Yeah, and I'm kind of curious as to how those came in as Q. It's a very strange mistake for an import record. Okay, so yeah, general. Okay. So if I click on Search Catalog again, it removes any selections I made where there isn't a toggle off. All right, well, that was another piece of information that you guys learned today, and I'll make a note of adding that to some documentation. And I'm also wondering, this is non-cataloging related, but it might be useful to do a generic search session as well and talk about all the different aspects of the search. Somehow, I mean, it applies to cataloging in some perspectives because of looking for records to attach to. So I think it'll be useful. All right, so we have a question. Anna was saying she sees a lot of errors regarding that ILS box. Very often that box is either missing information or has information not found in the 300 field. It's good to check that both the ILS box and the 300 are correct. And that is very true. I've come across a lot of books that will have illustrations listed in the 300, but then the fixed field box won't be marked.
And to watch that encoding level in conjunction to that, because if it's an 8, then it's very possible that someone didn't completely upgrade that CIP and missed that particular piece.
Good point.
Because that's usually one that is not filed in prior to publication.
Yeah. Yep, along with the pages and the size, illustrations isn't typically known pre-publication. Well, thanks everyone. I'm enjoying these sessions quite a bit and look forward to doing more of them. I'll send out a link with the recording as well as some topics that we're going to cover at our next one. Right now, the schedule for doing these is going to be every 2 weeks. That will give us some time in between to process what we've learned and also gather ideas for the next session. So anyway, thanks. Have a great day, everybody.